Hey now, hey now, hey now. We are live. Welcome to another stream. It will be the Council of Tolkien today. I have Matt and Sid with me. You can't see them now, but they'll say something, and you'll be able to hear them.
Hi, welcome to the show.
And
Really glad to be here. Let's have fun tonight.
I'm just going to make sure that I have both chats visible. And then I'm going to go ahead and just get the word out to a few different Discords that we're live. Okay, here's my YouTube chat. Can't actually see the YouTube chat. There we go, that's a lot better. Hey there, Gregory, how's it going? As soon as I said your name, I said, how's it going? And then you were saying, how's it going to me? And hello to Willpower. Hello, everybody that's coming in. It's going pretty great with me. And how's it going for Matt and Sid? Because that's the question in the chat currently. How's it going?
We are doing great.
I'm doing really well and having a lot more fun, more writing time. And there's a small chance, keep an eye on YouTube, if a user named Chris Lindbeck shows up, that's my wife.
I remember the last time that she was in the chat, and I didn't know it was her. So I was like, oh, this Chris person is asking another great question. And eventually you said, hey, Anons, how's it going? You said, oh, that's Chris,
Hi, Chris.
my wife. You know?
Hi, Chris. How are you?
Well, Chris isn't there just yet.
Oh, I see.
But possibly may show up. All right, let me just get the word out real quick. Okay. There we go. Okay. Letting people know that we're live. So, we have a fun show planned for you guys. It's not going to be anything like really crazy like last month. It's back to regularly scheduled sort of programming where we each have a different topic that we're going to bring up. But what's going to happen is you're going to see something interesting, and I think this is really fun because I spoke with Sid earlier and I spoke with Matt earlier, and we all sort of learned what the topics are. Or at least I learned what their topics are, and they learned what my topics are. I don't think they know each other's. Actually, no. I told Matt what Sid's topic is as briefly as I could. But I've always said that we have three very different but equally valid... hey, Moogle, how's it going? Three very different but equally valid... I don't want to say approaches because that's the wrong word. But specialties. Yeah. Yes. Specialties. Which I like to call the literary, the philosophical, and the practical. And that Matt is very practical. Hey, Time Lord Boy, how's it going? I've really been enjoying your questions, by the way, that you've been submitting on the YouTube community page. That's been really cool. Matt is very practical. He is always able to tell you things about sizes and distances and spans of years and capacities and construction materials and all sorts of things like that. Whereas Sid is very much the philosophical. Hey, David, how's it going? Sid is going to go into the spiritual or religious or really just epistemological sometimes, just very ethereal sort of thinking. And I'm going to see Smid smile here. You guys can't see him yet, but when I was talking to Matt, I said the difference is I'm going to say, oh, well, let's talk about what these words mean. And then Matt's like, well, I'm going to make you understand why Barad-dûr is 1,000 meters or whatever. And then Sid's like, let's all open our minds and learn something wonderful. And there's the smile I was looking for. So we don't, and I'm a literary guy. I delve into the linguistics and the literary aspects of it, and we don't stay in those lanes, but those are just the ones that we're comfortable in and that we go to the most often. But I delve into the philosophical, I delve into the practical. Matt delves into literary, Matt delves into philosophical, Sid delves into literary and practical. But it's cool to see. Oh, okay. Sid, we had this discussion earlier. We were talking about Hobbit names, Hobbit lady names, and I said there's this lady in the chat that has a very Hobbitish name. Do you remember what it was? And you didn't. And there she is, Bonnie Bell Plumbottom. That's the
Absolutely.
name. Very Shire name right there. Love it. Very Shire.
Welcome, Bonnie Bell.
Yes. Oh, let me just send a text to Laurel as well to let her know that we've gone line. Laurel is also a kind of a Hobbitish name if you think about it.
Hi, Laurel.
No, she's not there. I'm texting her. Matt's half paying attention, you guys. Okay, there we go.
I thought he was drinking ale.
He may or may not be drinking.
I'm drinking Ent Drop.
He's like, it comes in pints?
I'll be 6'4" when the show's over with.
Oh, dear. That'd be pretty. Somebody made a joke once, and hey, there's Chris.
Hey, love.
Chris saying, I wish I had such a hobbity name, right? Bonnie Bill Plumbottom, what a hobbitish name, right? Oh, what was I going to say? Damn, I just sort of like interrupted myself, and it just flew out of my mind.
If you're a hobbit,
I remember.
In the Shire, I mean, how do you resist a hobbit woman by the name of Plumbottom? I mean, there's no way you have a chance.
But they all have names. Here's the thing, though. You better be careful, Matt, because she has a daddy that's named like fork ass Plumbottom. There's somebody that's going to come after you with a pitchfork, and she could be related to Farmer Maggot for all you know. But anyway, I remember that somebody made I guess sort of a joke, but it could also be true, because we talked about on Quora the idea of Merry and Pippin seeing Moogle with the watch streak, nice, 230 streams not missed, wonderful. Of Merry and Pippin seeing Treebeard after the events of the War of the Ring and everything, and I said, well, they were probably visiting Gondor and Rohan all the time, and especially later in life, they lived in Rohan for a little while and then Gondor for the rest of their life, and they probably saw Treebeard several times, and somebody said, what if every time they went, they had a little bit more Endroff, so by the time that they passed away, they're both like 6 feet tall? And they're buried next to Aragorn, right? So, future historians who look at, the situation there may say, well, here's Aragorn buried with 2 men of Gondor. It must have been very important nights, Oh, Chris is short for Kristen. My sister's name is Kristen. It's spelled very differently, but that's her name. But imagine, that nobody would know that they were halflings because they kept taking sneaking a little bit more Entdroft, and I think from Treebeard's perspective, he wouldn't see much of a difference.
True.
Well, maybe you're bigger. I'm not sure. You're all very small to me.
So maybe you're right.
Perhaps you do need more Endroft. And there's Sega just flexing with 590 watch streak. That's amazing, Sega. I know you lurk, but you're important to the community. He's not missed a stream for 590 days. That's amazing. I think I've missed more streams than Sega has. Anyway, guys, let's go over here so you can see the smiling faces of Matt and Sid, and we can get this party started. There they are. So we're the Council of Tolkien, just to sort of the Council of Isengard, according to Matt here with that white hand there, Oh, thank you, Chris. That means a lot that you said that. Chris said that she can hear my linguistic background in my pure vowels and rolled R's, and that I'm pronouncing everything correctly. I do catch myself sometimes where I'll say like Legolas, and then I'm like, Legolas, Legolas, Legolas. You know, those movies rotted your brain. But and you know who's actually kept me, in saying Legolas is actually Matt, because he always says it correctly. But thank you, Chris. I take great pride in my Elvish. So just for anybody who may be watching, who is seeing us here for the first time, or maybe you're live watching us for the first time, basically we are three Tolkien scholars, and I just want to go around and have us give our backgrounds and credentials real quick, just to sort of make this a jumping on point for people. Maybe Matt, why don't you start us off? Just tell us
Hi, everybody.
A little about yourself.
I got started with this stuff when I was about 11, and I read The Hobbit first, and it became really kind of cool and everything. But I'm a retired professor of philosophy, ethics, and world religions from the U.S. Navy College, and I have been doing this now for
Hi, Laurel.
Better part of 40 years or so. And we have a group of writers on Quora who are called the Nine. There's 9 of us. Sid, John, and I are 3 of the 9. We're the leadership group of the 9 on Quora. And if you have any interest in seeing our articles, you can see it there. But I would consider myself to be kind of one of few people online who really specialize in the physical measurements and capacities and materials of Middle-earth, and I don't just make this stuff up. I use a lot of research to figure out what they're talking about. As Tolkien said, that the nature of Middle-earth is very much the world of our world, and so I try to do that kind of thing. And tonight will be kind of a little bit of a featurette on that kind of thing.
And hey, WT and Laurel, who came in there, and I see people on YouTube spamming the likes. Thank you for that. Sid, why don't you go ahead and just do a very quick introduction for anybody who may not know you?
Hi, I'm Sid. I first read Tolkien, The Hobbit and the entire trilogy when I was 12. When I was probably 17, I got a first edition of the Silmarillion the day it came out, and I simply decided to live as if this is our real history. After we're somewhere down the line in the 8th or 9th age now, Eru is still out there. We have trouble finding him. And what if this is all real, and it might be a really good idea to grow like Frodo or Aragorn or Gandalf in the way we live our lives and dwell in the time we are given. And that's what I do.
And WT brings up a point that Matt has a pretty cool pedigree that he didn't even mention. So since Matt won't ring that bell, I will. Matt helped consult on the Lord of the Rings feature films, actually.
It was white paper work in '99.
Yeah. And then there's me. You guys probably know me since you're on my channel, but just in case you might need a refresher, my name is John Sierra, and I've been reading Tolkien since I was about 8 years old when I first read The Hobbit, and I've been studying it in a more serious matter ever since I was a teenager. And I don't look very old, but I will be turning 45 in a few months. So it's been quite a while that I've been studying. The fascination started after reading The Lord of the Rings and devouring all the appendixes and trying to learn everything that I could about this world because it fascinated me. Is finding in my parents' bookshelf, and this is the same copy that I found back then, of Unfinished Tales of Middle-earth and Numenor, and that was my first introduction to like the First Age and the Children of Húrin, and learning about the Polantri and the wizards and the history of Numenor. And, it fascinated me, and I've been studying ever since. I do tend to focus mostly on the linguistic sort of little quibbles out there, and I think that the answer more often than not to a question is in the meanings of the words that Tolkien uses, and not just the Elvish words that he has created, but also the words that he uses in our very own language, and I was going to talk a little bit about that in my section, which is coming up, and I just realized that I don't have my notes up because when here it is. When we were setting up, there were some technical difficulties, and I had to reboot my computer when I was just talking with Matt, so my notes weren't up. But anyway, the format is the show is that the three of us each get a half-hour segment, and it's not like that we get a half hour to talk. It's a half hour for all three of us to discuss something that we each decided on. David says he wishes he'd stuck with Tolkien when you were young. It's never too late. Never too late to reread it all. And but if you find you don't have time for actually sitting and reading, I have wonderful playlists on my channel of myself reading The Hobbit and The Fellowship of the Ring, and now The Two Towers we started on, and giving you all the lore and the background and all the knowledge and wisdom that I have about each passage. And all of those were broadcast live, and I answer questions from everybody there as well. But anyway, let me get my timer up, because we will need that. There we are. So I don't need really 2 minutes, but I'm going to set myself a 2-minute timer to introduce our first segment, because the first segment is of my choosing. And here we go. So over the past few weeks, gentlemen, I have been finding myself drawn to a lot of questions that have come through both on Quora and on YouTube about wolves. And in the episode of my question and answer show that just went up for the general public just this Wednesday, you'll see the thumbnail picture is about wargs and werewolves, and are they related to each other? Did the wargs evolve from the werewolves? And in my study, I found out that's not the case. They are two separate entities with their own origins, which I'll talk more about after the intro. But why is it that we have wolves so often used as the scary villains in Tolkien stories, and what relation does that have to the general idea of wolf as a metaphor, both in fairy stories and in real life? And this is also related to the episode that's already up for members, but will go up next Wednesday, where I talk about wargs and werewolves as well, and also to another question that I got actually in a comment on YouTube about, are there fictional fairy stories that exist in Middle-earth? So that's what I'd like to discuss here. Let me I used up 90 seconds. So I'm gonna set us for a half hour here. And I'm just going to welcome in Tommy Does Chile. Welcome in. We need Aragorn now more than ever. We need people like Aragorn, I would say. Right? He's the best example of masculinity there is. Sid or Matt, do you guys remember what month it was that we had the toxic versus non-toxic masculinity discussion?
That was about 6 months ago.
About 6 months ago, we had an episode where that was actually my chosen topic, where I talked about Tolkien's views on masculinity and how characters like Aragorn and Samwise and some others are examples of positive masculinity, and that he does feature toxic masculinity in characters like Grima and Saruman. So, yeah. Are we doing the thing where we try to keep our responses in agreement or support for the speaker? Well, since we're all going to be, discussing each thing, not necessarily, although I do like things to stay as supportive as possible for all three of us. So I'm going to start the timer here. So just to say that, and I know Sid looked intrigued, and some of you might be intrigued, wargs and werewolves, I have found through my study that they are separate entities. They do not have anything really to do with each other than that they're both wolves. Tolkien gave us a lot of hints that werewolves, and the linguistic application here of were, coming from an Old English word that means man, are at least necromantic or sorcery in origin, meaning that they are derived from what Matt refers to as the displacement of souls, or the manipulation of souls, whereas wargs appear to be animals. But Tolkien, in his letters, including one of the letters that was revealed in the new edition of the Letters of J.R.R. Tolkien, letter 290a, refers to wargs as demonic, which is a very different sort of word that he doesn't use all that often. And the comparison then becomes that the wolves, as they are extant to Middle-earth, more or less have a lot more in common with, say, the spiders of Mirkwood than they would with werewolves. And warg itself as a word is derived from the Old Norse vargur, which means wolf, and seems to be a name that is specifically used in Rovanian, in Wilderland, which is actually what the Hobbit tells us, that the men of the wilds east of the Misty Mountains refer to the White Wolves as the wargs. The Hobbits refer to them as the White Wolves. Sometimes they're called the Wild Wolves. So here's the question that I'm going to pose to you guys before I talk anymore. Why does Tolkien need two completely separate wolf-type villains? And where are the werewolves in the Third Age, considering that Gandalf mentions them as having existed in the Third Age?
I would say that wargs and werewolves are two different types of corruption. A werewolf was once something more human, like a vampire, and then transformed. And sometimes there's some vampire stories where a vampire can even appear as a werewolf. Whereas it would appear that wargs are demonified wolves, but with one key note. Wargs can speak. And that means in Tolkien's term, they have Theia, they have a soul. And that creates a very different picture than just wild and terrible wolves. So that's what I would throw in at the start.
Yeah. Well, they do speak their own language. They don't speak human language like some birds do. The way that it was described in The Hobbit was that Bilbo couldn't understand. It just sounded like a lot of growling to him, and that Gandalf relayed to him later when he wrote his book what was being said by the wild wolves. And by the way, the wargs, the wild wolves, also I have confirmed, and I just found this today, they did exist in the First Age. They are mentioned in the book The War of the Jewels, when there was a specific cadre of Melkor's orc soldiers called the Wolf Riders, who were orcs that rode on wolves. Matt, I want your thoughts on this as well.
I agree with Sid's distinction. There's I believe this to kind of come down to the unholy melding or breeding of twisted wolves that have been bred with something else and made them evil. As far as the wargs are concerned, but the werewolves are much different in Tolkien's conception. Those involve very clearly what I call, and what's out there is called a soul entrapment.
That was the phrase I was looking for, soul entrapment.
Yeah. Soul entrapment, and the ring has features of not only a soul entrapment, because part of Sauron is in the ring, but it also features an element of soul anchoring. In other words, it's used as because a part of Sauron is in the ring. It helps to anchor him to Middle-earth, because his Theia is unnaturally divided, and it acts as an anchor for him to reassemble his form over a period of time. Blah blah blah. It's a different topic, but the point is that soul entrapment is really what's going on here, and the concept behind soul entrapment is complicated. There's an answer to it, but I don't want to hog all the time here. But basically, a being, a wolf, is killed, and the soul is allowed to release, and there is a spell or a room that is enchanted to the degree that once the soul is released, another evil soul is killed in order for that soul to be entrapped in the room and want to find a home, or what Tolkien calls as a house or housing, and then finds that housing in the body of the dead wolf, Now, what's interesting in as far as wolf lore or werewolf lore is that this is why they partially try to stand up and they're crooked because they have the form of men and they are twisted and they're not in so-called the right kind of body. So they have a crooked standing gait and they can run on all fours, but they also have to bend over because the spirit that's embodied them is basically what you might call a demonic humanoid. And so it's trapped in this body that's not really designed for upright walking. So it has this crooked effect, and the soul is entrapped in it. And Sauron and Melkor are able to do this, and Sauron eventually becomes a master expert at this kind of sorcery, necromancer, those kinds of things. And anyway, that's the brief little summary of what I've got to say. But this is kind of the origin of how these are different.
I'm going to pass it to Sid in a moment. I just want to comment on. I see one thing as being a little bit of almost what you said, but the reverse. I think it's more that they're in a wolf body trying to walk like a man, and that's what makes them sort of lurching around like that.
That's what I meant to say.
Sid, go ahead.
At a soul level, I think it's relevant to say there's another pronunciation of crooked, which is crooked.
Yes, crooked.
So in the criminal...
I'm so glad you brought this up. I wasn't going to get into this right away, but warg, vargur, right? I looked into the etymologies of it in Old Norse and Old English, and it has two other meanings other than wolf, and that is evil spirit and criminal.
Interesting. And the other thing is, I'm aware of only one other case of an evil soul embodied in a non-human form. And I learned this recently. The Old Man Willow. I had always guessed that Old Man Willow was essentially a horn. But
Huorn, yeah. Okay, just to be sure, he said Huorn, not that other thing that you might have heard.
Huorn. Okay. Thank you for the correction. But no, Tolkien makes it explicit at some point that
there's an evil spirit that was trapped in there. Yeah.
Exactly. And do you guys know of any other humanoid spirits?
Hey, Medio Surreal. It's possible that the Ologhai might have been sort of golems in that sense as well, because they sort of seem to cease to exist after the fall of Sauron. But I wanted to go into a little bit more of the idea of wolves as villains, because if you notice, there aren't good wolves. We don't hear about wolves being anything other than really dangerous. The original Aragorn the First, because our guy is Aragorn the Second. He was killed by wolves. Wolves invaded the Shire. And I think it all comes from fairy stories of like the big bad wolf and stuff like that, where they're representing hunters and predators, even used as a metaphor. And I'm going to use two different examples here. One is in the story The Children of Húrin, the barbarians from the east, the Easterlings, coming over into Beleriand and willingly joining with Morgoth. They wear wolf skins. They're literally man in wolf clothing. The other example, and this is one that I also just discovered today, and is very esoteric because it becomes from the story Tal Endil, which is an unfinished story that about a young boy in what would become Gondor later, and dealing with Númenórean ships coming, and they weren't exactly welcome at the time. But anyway, they mentioned crying wolf, which is really interesting, which means that they have a version of that story, The Boy Who Cried Wolf, in Middle-earth. Do we have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the first thing to say is let's just look at the British Germanic culture, the Nordic culture of Europe. What were the big predators that then show up as horrific beings? You don't have lions and tigers, so it's going to be bears and wolves, and bears fell mostly on the good side.
Yeah. Bjorn.
So Yeah, exactly. The Beorn and the Beornings.
Yes.
So I think wolves are simply generically the most frightening beings in the
Fenrir is
cultural
another
mind.
one. Yeah.
Yeah, the cultural mind and uh, folk tales
I want
that Tolkien was drawing from.
I want to pass it over to Matt in a moment, but I wanted to mention also, since you were talking about, folklore and sort of the generic thing, is that I also came to the conclusion that Tolkien is following Germanic fairy stories not only in adopting wolves as villains, and even used in metaphors like, when Hurin found his wife dying, he said that she looked so haggard, she looked like, a wolf herself. But also that the huntsman is usually the heroic character that we see, sort of the Beowulf archetype, the huntsman, like from Snow White, and a lot of these other Germanic or sometimes French. I know he wouldn't like to hear that, but sometimes French stories as well. And we see Beorn, who is the Beowulf, by the way, I've got into the linguistics of this a million times, that it does mean man who dwells. It means hunter because of the wolf part, but it also means eater of honey. So he's man and he's bear and he's wolf, but the wolf part is a metaphor for being a hunter. Hunters are good, wolves are bad. We see it with, there's a passage in The Hobbit talking about how the wargs were always at war with these men that came out of the south, out of Gondor, and had started dwelling around Mirkwood, and and they're described as being very brave and very noble, and how much the wargs just hated them for existing. Matt, I want your thoughts now.
My thoughts are that, just as an aside, this concept of, or the word were means man. That's true, but it's also where the term weregild comes from.
The
And
price
it
of a man.
it basically means weregild is basically man payment or man price, and that's sometimes paid when someone is killed in battle, and a weregild is taken as a payment to compensate the family or whoever for the loss of that man. Anyway, it's just an aside. Anyway, I've got one thing to add to what you both have said, but especially what Sid has said, and that is that wolves not only follow the European fixation and fear about wolves, but it's following another little trend that Tolkien gets into, which is the neutral belligerent. Wolves are the neutral belligerent in common. In other words, they are not just the watcher in the water. They're not the earth eaters of the world, those kinds of beings that are normally seen as neutral belligerents. But they're neutral belligerents in common. In other words, they're common to the world, like sharks are to the ocean.
Yeah, they're extant.
That's right.
Yeah.
And they are easily and very often corrupted by the evil forces in Tolkien's works. They're easily corrupted because, well, if they can be corrupted and continue to use that corruption for the consumption of their enemies to eat, feed, blah, 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 or basically appeal to their more base natures, then that's something that Morgoth and Sauron were very, very keen on doing. And having said that, I'll just say that the neutral belligerent that didn't necessarily go to the evil side were things like Huorns. Huorns were basically not guardians.
There's
but
an anger there. There's
an anger there that was harnessed and channeled by the good forces that were allowed to be in Middle Earth by Yavanna's portion of the Song of the Ainulindala, on what would be protecting Middle Earth, wood, water, and hill. And the Huorns are these soldiers, warriors, anger denizens, of the forest, that are one of the things that are protected by and used by the Ents. And they're also neutral belligerents that were basically used for good purposes. But I would say in Tolkien's works, most of the neutral belligerents that were moved to one side or the other were done by the evil side, and wolves are part of that.
I agree, and I'm going to hand it over to Sid because he was raising his hand before I mentioned. I came up with two other instances of the huntsman trope as being the opposing to the wolf trope that Tolkien used was the Pukul men, which is really like a very second age story, and in the third age, the Druidan. They were basically just wild men that were almost neutral belligerent themselves, but they predated on orcs rather than people. And the last thing I want to mention before I hand it over to Sid is it's just an interesting thought, because a wolf as a great hunter and a great common fear that we see in both in real life and in many metaphors, cry wolf, the wolves are at the door, that kind of thing, are canids, whereas Tolkien has this fondness for dogs, like, for example, for Huon. The only negative, and I searched, the only negative reference to dogs that I can find was a reference to ravening dogs in the wild. Sid, go ahead.
I just had a fun thought. Would you say that a Huon is simply an ent with an anger management problem?
Well, I want to add.
I love it.
That.
I love it.
I love it, but I don't think that you're overly simplifying it. But let's just say that I don't think Huorns were ever intended to be in what you might call the more perfected form of an ent. I think they're awakened and moving trees that are not stationary. I do happen to personally think that Old Man Willow is the oldest Huorn that there is, because he is not stationary, he's not static, and he's not an ent. And so if you had to, do three categories there, it seems to me he would have to be the oldest Huorn. And I personally believe that there's some evidence that indicates that the older you are as a Huorn, the slower and more tree-like you become, which means...
Well, hold on, that's incorrect. It's the older the Ents get, the more tree-like they become. The older the Huorns get, the more active they get.
Well...
And I do agree with Sid's thought on Old Man Willow, though.
Okay, but just to finish my thought here, if Old Man Willow is the oldest and he's barely mobile, and he's loaded with magical abilities, as we all know, he's able to twist paths and the nature of the atmosphere in his area, and Gandalf says he's the oldest, and Tom Bombadil says he's the oldest. Then it seems to be that the older you are, the closer you get to bear movement. And anyway, my point is that I personally think that there's in my mind there's more evidence that the older you are as a Huorn, the slower you get, and eventually in 10,000 years from now there'd be more Old Man Willow type Huorns who have finally become more tree-like and more sedentary and more dangerous, but not as mobile as the army of Huorns we saw that took out the Uruks at the last day of
at Helm's
battle
Deep, yeah.
At Helm's Deep, yeah. So I mean, those guys were super mobile. I mean, would they move? They moved hundreds of miles in a few days, and it wasn't just Ents. So that's highly mobile Huorns.
I don't agree that Willow is a Huorn. I agree with what Sid said, that there is a spirit trapped in a tree. And the reason is because we know that there are Huorns in the Old Forest and that they can move around and whatnot, but that Old Man Willow is a completely separate danger that has a name given to him, Well,
I agree with all that, but hold on.
But Sid...
Hold on.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
Hold on. I agree with that. I'm not saying you're not right. I'm adding to this. I'm saying
I
think that that's true, but Huorns also are inspirited. These are beings that have inspirited, purpose to them from whatever divine, creation that they are part of. So they all have spirits.
There is a distinction, and I promise I'm going to get to you, Sid. There is a distinction between what was said in Aulia and Yavanna of spirits coming from the outside And what Sid was saying earlier, which I agree with, of the spirit of a man or an elf being trapped in a tree. And I think this is also the difference between wolves and werewolves, where one is necromantic and the other is demonic. And just to address the chat, that word there, Tommy, Nyauroth, it doesn't mean werewolf, it's horde of wolves. Go ahead, Sid.
You said part of what I was going to say, that Tolkien was very clear that it was the spirit of something not a tree in Old Man Willow, therefore not a horn at all. But Matt, I believe that something you said somewhat disagrees with something that Treebeard said. He indicated pretty clearly, I think, that the horns, let's say the horns of Fangorn Forest, were Ents who got turned to darkness in the wars with Sauron. So my belief is that the Ents of Fangorn Forest, at least, were of the same nature. The horns of Fangorn Forest were the tree souls that Yavanna brought in from outside to make living, talking trees. They just got so angry at the depredations that orcs and anyone who dealt with orcs, and maybe even a dwarf with too big an axe, as Gimli felt, wouldn't stand. They wouldn't stand for it for a minute, but that they were fundamentally tree spirits. And I think that's very clear, at least in my reading of what Treebeard says.
I have a question on that.
Go ahead, Matt, and then I have something to say.
Thank you. If the Huorns are Ents who have become angry, and Ents have spirits, then that means that Huorns also have spirits.
Exactly, but they are they are tree spirits. They're not human spirits trapped in a tree.
Yes. I agree with all that.
I agree with that as well. But
I'm willing to agree that Old Man Willow is a special case.
Yeah, he's unique.
But it seemed okay. Gotcha.
I do have to dissent here on one thing, is that Ents and trees are not the same thing. The Ents, and I have to go into etymology again. I know here's John with his dictionary, but Ent means giant. And Tolkien conceived of tree Ents and stone Ents. They're not, bodies like trees or bodies like stone. They were the giants of the wood and the giants of the hills. And the tree Ents are not trees themselves. They are the shepherds of the trees. And the Huorns are trees that have become restless and angry, and the way that Treebeard said it specifically was they are trees that have become Entish.
Yes, I agree with that. Okay, I think that's good clarity there, because I agree that they are not. They are not sub-Ents or fallen Ents or angry Ents. They are trees that have awoken and become Entish. That's correct.
Okay, I actually want to. Walter's asking a question about Ents, and I wanted to pivot away from that because it's not actually the topic. But who would have notified the Ents in the first age of the dwarves who took Menegroth? That would be Beren. Actually, Beren would be the one to do that. I understood what you meant. Now, I want to get back to the wolf discussion, and Tommy brings up something that I hadn't even thought of, and this is a really interesting question that I think I want you guys to answer first, because I'm not sure. Tommy Does Chile says, so was the attack on Holland before going into Moria, was that wolves or werewolves? And we talked about this last month, because we talked about the attack before they went into Moria in our Karathras discussion, and the interesting thing about it, there were no bodies. And they couldn't decide whether the bodies of the wolves that were slain had simply disintegrated or were moved away. Could those have been actual werewolves?
I have a point on that. If you don't have opposable fingers or a mind or body structure to move anything away, they can't be moved.
I agree.
If they were just wargs, they would be wolf-like, and they wouldn't be able to move away any bodies.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, I will say one other thing real quick, and that is the ability to the number of souls that were available for the necromancy uh, related to soul entrapment is very difficult and not common. So there would have been a great number of wargs and a very, very, very few number of actual werewolves walking around. I mean, that is a hard thing
Yeah.
and not an easy thing to do. So yeah, there may have been some there that weren't, the bodies weren't found because they were taken away by other werewolves who took their fellow brethren away. I think that's also true. All those things can actually stand together at the same time.
I agree, and I'm going to pass it to you, Sid, in just a second. We've got 3 minutes, so you'll have time. I agree with what you said, and I think, yes, I think those may have been the Third Age werewolves that we were sort of looking for here. And it's true that there are very few werewolves, even in the First Age. They were really only seen in Morgoth's court and guarding the entrance to his palace. They weren't all throughout Middle-earth. Sid, go ahead.
I really agree with the ideas I've heard, but I have a very clear picture of what I believe happened in Holland when they had that sudden night attack. Were they called wolves or wargs in that attack?
They only said wolves. They didn't say warg or werewolf. They only said wolves.
I believe it was a phantasm attack by Sauron. It tastes of his magic. And I believe
it doesn't seem Saruman style, does it?
No, I'm saying it does seem very Saruman.
No, I said Saruman. It doesn't, because some people say, well, it could have been Saruman, and I'm just agreeing with you that it seems more like Sauron.
No, I'm disagreeing with you. I think it was very much Saruman.
Oh, I thought you said Sauron. Okay, all right. So you think it was Saruman creating? Yeah. Do you think? Okay, so let me ask you: do you think they were really there, or were they just phantoms?
I think they were phantoms. I think that, first of all, I don't think that Sauron figured out where the Fellowship was before Moria. I think all the attacks until they entered Moria were Saruman was the one who sent the Crabane and
Crabine.
Yeah. And Aragorn and Gandalf pretty much said so. So he saw them, he knew where they were, and at night he sent an attack of phantasmical wolves whose bodies vanished when they were killed. They were gone. That's that's how I've always read it from 13 years old.
I have a question for you. Was the danger real?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
While they were attacking, they could rip flesh.
So
never thought of it.
Let me bring something up. I'll give you a shot, even though we're running out of time. I'll give you a shot, Matt. My other question is, if it's Saruman doing this, how could these wolves have managed to capture the halflings and bring them to Isengard alive and unspoiled?
I don't know that Saruman had that idea at that point. And the other thing I'd say is, if they had trapped them or killed them, he could have sent orcs after. Just orcs were slower than a phantasmical, telepathic sending. He can send his own image telepathically. We learned that in Fangorn. So I think he sent a telepathic sending of images of wolves that, while he was controlling them, had physical power.
Okay.
I've always read it that way.
We're out of time, but I wanted to give Matt a shot to finish off here.
Well, Sid, I love you, but how can you have a phantasmic projection from distance, a long distance, from Saruman, who I don't believe has that kind of power, and actually make phantasms that actually can rip flesh in the physical? They would have to be physical to rip flesh from the physical. So I think that needs to be a topic of a future discussion
I
because
I
that's a
agree with that. I think we have to delve into the nature of magic and spirits, and it goes into the discussion that I've had with you about the dead men of Dunharrow and their attack on the Corsairs of Umbar.
I want to point out one other thing. In Norse mythology, there's a people called the Ven or the Vendel with a W. And it was known that that group of people in the Denmark area would attack. And there were designated 2 or 3 people that were just behind the attack that would come in and grab the bodies of the fallen comrades and take them away because they believed that the enemy could not capture them, and if the enemy captured them, they would not go to the afterlife. So the concept of actually going in and having squads of people remove the dead is something that we might want to talk about in the future because that is Norse mythology related to basically the Danes. And anyway, that's my thought, but.
No, Chewie, I don't think that Saruman appearing right outside Fangorn was a telepathic illusion either. I think that was actually him. But that's a whole other discussion as well. All right, I think we covered a lot of great ground. We discovered another sort of mystery here that we're going to have to come back to at some point or another. But anyway, unless anybody needs a quick break for a bathroom or anything like that, I'd like to move on to Matt's segment. Are we good to move on?
I'm going to adjust my lighting, but
Okay.
I'll stay right here.
Okay. You want me to go, John?
Well, let's just let Sid do that real quick.
Okay.
There we go. All right, so in 2 minutes or possibly less, Matt, go ahead and describe what we're going to be discussing next.
Well, I'm wearing my shirt for a particular purpose. Today we're going to be covering as John mentioned earlier, the practical, or what we may call the physical aspects of the canon passages that indicate a lot of passages that indicate what the size of Isengard is, or what was known as Angrenost. Angrenost is the Sindarin name for Isengard, is known as the Iron Fortress, and in Rohirrim, it was, which is an Old English word, was known as Isengard, which it means iron enclosure, basically the same kind of thing. And the reason I'm talking about this today is because I saw something on Quora was talking about, what's the most fascinating, fortress, and then there's Carn Dum, which is cool, and there's, all the fortresses of Middle Earth that you can think of. And I just thought the one that I've always just loved the most, especially out of the books, and the way that they were done in Jackson's movies, I thought he got it accurately, perfectly, was Isengard. And so I wanted to talk about with the way this fortress looked, and who built it, what it was built out of, its dimensions, how many people could be housed there based on historical data we know from the Middle Ages, the Iron Ages and Middle Ages, this kind of a fortress style, and how many people could be garrisoned there, and to kind of just get a better view of the fantasy description of what this structure looked like, felt like, how many people were possibly there, why the Númenóreans built it, how many feet this is, so to give people a better idea.
10 seconds.
And this is not my idea. This is passages that have been put together and have arrived at this conclusion.
Matt. Okay. Well, there we go. You used up the whole 2 minutes. But Sid's going to start us off, but I just want to address the chat just to say that, and I have to set up the timer anyway, so just give me a moment here, Sid. People are hyped to hear this. I just want to let you know that, Matt. People are hyped to hear this. Chris especially says that she wants to see if her fanfic makes sense, so I think you're going to help her out with some writing here. And let's see. Walter White here mentions something that I think you're going to find agreeable, Matt, that Isengard is sort of one of the wonders of Middle-earth, like the wonders of the world,
Agree with that.
And I also agree with that. All right, I'm going to start the timer here, and since Sid, since your hand shot up during the intro, you're going to start off here with the Isengard discussion.
I just have two direct questions. One is, I am almost certain that in the text of The Lord of the Rings, the Ring of Isengard, that is the outer wall, is described as being 1 mile in diameter. Anything different than that or contradictory, let me know up front. The other is that as depicted, there were underground all kinds of things, including where he made all of the Uruk-hai, but I believe there was the ring wall and the central tower, and unlike what would be true in a Númenórean or any human colony, there were no outbuildings at the time.
There were.
There were outbuildings inside the ring?
There were storerooms, there were guard posts. You're used to...
I was thinking of dwellings. I was thinking of places where people might live.
Well, it was a watchtower and a fortress, but so there weren't like... there wasn't a castle town, but...
So there were no dormitories.
Yeah. I mean, there were possibly barracks at some point. It's just that in the two towers, that when we get there, the Ents had wrecked so much of it, and they said that only Orthanc remained.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you. That's all I had to start with.
Okay, I think I don't have I could grab the book and look to see, but I think your measurement thing is correct, that it was described as about 1 mile in diameter, and I did see Matt nodding when you said that, so I'm going to assume that you're correct on that. And I know that in my discussion with Matt earlier, he was talking a lot about the underground portion of Isengard, and we know that the Númenóreans built Isengard, or Angrenost as they called it. Isengard was, of course, the more Rohan. The language is actually called Rohanese, which is, in the actual text, it's represented as Old English, which is pretty fascinating. And some of it is what I would call not fake Old English, but speculative Old English, where you get words like Hoblitla and Dwimmerlake, But anyway, I don't want to get into all that because I can go on forever. But Matt, my question for you is, do you think that the underground portions were Númenórean in origin, or do you think that that was something that Saruman started when he started to dwell there in the early Third Age?
Okay, I want to throw in one other quick question on the same thing. Do you think that Peter Jackson's depiction of the underground matches what Tolkien would have thought?
Okay, you guys ready?
Yeah.
I'm gonna deal with yours first. Then I'm gonna go on with my presentation here because I got
sure.
Yeah. Isengard was indeed 1 mile, but not a mile as we know it as 5,280 feet. It was a mile in Númenórean mile. It was based on the Rangar, and the Rangar mile for Númenóreans was 5,000 feet in our terms today. So it was 2,080 feet less than our current mile. The underground portions, I believe they did exist as storage and other types of areas, but I believe that under Saruman they were greatly expanded, not only expanded but also delved deeper into the earth to make not only the weapons they needed to make the Uruk, but also to make a lot of their storehouses
and their furnaces and foundries and all that stuff as well.
Now, John is correct that there were some outbuildings, which you might call outbuildings, guardhouses, and things like that. That is true, but not to the degree that there was a crowding of space. And it was basically still an open foresty plain. Saruman really did wipe all that out, and it got rid of the trees and the what you might call the flora and fauna of the interior parts of the walls during the later years. And the last question is, did Jackson portray Isengard accurately? I believe he did, to the 99th percentile.
I had one other quick question. At the very end, before the Uruk-hai go down to attack Mordor, were they living inside the ring underground, or are they living in the surrounding woods?
Did you mean Rohan there?
Yeah, before they went down to attack Rohan.
Yeah.
Before they went to attack Helm's Deep, were they living underground or in the woods?
I'm going to address that in my little presentation here. And
Great.
yes, so I'm going to start from the beginning. So as a lot of you know, who are watching, and my colleagues here, they know that I get into this kind of thing, and I've looked at all of the data and the canon from multiple sources about what this looked like, and I've made some estimations on when this actually kind of occurred. So here goes. My estimation is that this was built sometime in Second Age 3333, or within 5 years in front or behind that date. And I don't think it was behind. I think it was somewhere between 3328 and 3333. So about that 5-year period of time.
A question about that, Matt. Are you saying that it's somewhere in that 5-year period, or are you saying that it was 5 years of construction?
I think it was officially completed in the period of time between 3328
okay. So the range.
33.
Okay.
Yeah, the range was then, and I might be off, but I'm giving that 90%. Had to, from all the research I did.
Yeah.
It has to be in this period of time. So without getting into all the citation there.
How long do you think it took to build?
I think duration was probably about 100 years.
Okay.
And it might have been 50, because the Númenóreans moved material, and this was a very, very important fortress for them in Middle Earth at the time. So it was not a simple outpost. It was a very important thing for them inland from their positions in this part of the age. And I think they also built it to support other invasions they thought they were going to do into Middle Earth. So construction being what it is at the time, and these being Númenóreans, 50 to 100 years is my estimate. And it was, but that's an estimate. But it seems to be, from all the dates that I have, that this was completed sometime between 3328 and 3333 of the Second Age. So it was riven from the bones of the earth. This is a quote at Tolkien's works. A black stone that could not be harmed by anything that the end did to it or threw at it. Now there's some discussion about whether this is obsidian. It could be layered obsidian. It could be iron in between obsidian that would not allow it to be broken. But in our world, it looked like obsidian because it had a shine to it. Obsidian is basically kind of brittle in a lot of ways.
It was probably not granite, right? It was probably obsidian might be brittle, but like when you're talking about a structure that big and that thick, you're not going to be able to easily shatter it unless you knew exactly where the cleavage point was and you had the correct tool of a correct size. So.
That's because there's a couple references.
Matt, could you whatever you just said? Could you repeat it, because your audio skipped out for a moment there?
Oh. I was going to say it's interesting because there was a couple of references to not only riven from the bones of the earth, in quotes, but this had a black sheen to the stone that could not be harmed by the Ents or by the stones that they threw. The only two things that can work are black granite and black obsidian. But it's interesting, I did some research on this, that if they are layered together and there's no space between them for them to bend or be broken, that the two together can't be broken. So it wouldn't surprise me if black obsidian and black granite weren't used in what you might call a layered or a laminate form.
Mm-hmm.
Because Tolkien is very clear that the things of that world are the same as this world, and all we have in this world are black granite and obsidian that have the same tone and shimmer and look of what Tolkien is exactly describing here. So that's a little bit of research on that.
Matt, a question coming in from the chat, and it's just asking you to elaborate a little more on why the Númenóreans would build something like Isengard that's so far inland.
They wanted control of two positions. That's a very strategic point. This is why
it's right by the gap. What would later be called the Gap of Rohan. It's watching a very important mountain pass.
That's correct. Yeah. It's also part of the reason why Helm's Deep was built in kind of the same kind of area.
The Oh, what was
Yeah,
it started with a G. It had a different name back in the day. I can't think of it right now.
yeah, it'll come to us.
It
Sid.
also was the south end of the northward road that led up to the Great East Road.
Yeah,
That's
That's
it's
that's
yeah, no, and Sid brings up an excellent point. It's essentially a choke point that you're getting to watch over, and considering that Numenor was not a friendly presence in Middle Earth in the late Second Age, yeah.
yeah. The other reason is that it was built on a major river, and in medieval times, when you were able to set up a large castle over a river, or a large fortress complex, or a series of complexes over a river, and that means you not only control the water and the fish that lived in there for food, but you also controlled transportation.
Yeah.
And so this was the Numenorians' idea, and the mid ages idea of how to control a complete, not just an area, but a complete region, a huge region.
It also
Okay.
means you can easily survive a siege.
Yeah,
That too.
with vast stores. Now, a lot coming in from the chat there. Fuseblower asks if Numenor had volcanoes because obsidian is volcanic. They wouldn't be bringing the materials from Numenor. That would just take too long. They would use materials that were right there in Middle Earth. And of course, we do know that Middle Earth had a lot of volcanoes in the past. They became kind of rare in the Third Age, but it's enough for quite a lot of obsidian to form, especially in an area that's a little close to Mordor. And there was probably a lot of it brought out of Beleriand when that was a thing. Chris whipped out the book. There were houses in the Ring of Isengard. Quote, many houses there were, chambers, halls, and passages, cut and tunneled back to the walls upon their inner side, so that all the open circle was overlooked by countless windows and dark doors.
I think that's true in the later ages, but not as the Numenorians had
Oh,
built it.
so you're talking, Second Age Angranost.
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
There were a lot more outhouses and what you might call side houses built against the wall, which you see a lot in Middle Ages fortresses and castles. But going back to Numenor real quick, they had, well, they had. Let me continue on. I'll get to that other thing later
Okay.
because this
Sure.
is
Sure.
a little bit
I know
of
you have
part
you have
to it.
stuff you want to get through. I understand.
Yeah, yeah. The There were. It looks to me like from the research that there were. It was this part of the development under Saruman took place between Third Age 2990 and 3010 during this 30-year period of time, which to me indicates that the period of time that it took for Sauron to corrupt Saruman through the Palantir and convince him that he needed to build his own army was really happening here. In the movie, they had to condense this, obviously, to make it look like it was, to save some time and to explain it to the audience. But this had begun much earlier than that, and and all of the dates look like this had to have started around 2990, which means that if you start your breeding program at that point, that by Third Age 3019, when the Lord of the Rings happened in the Return of the King and the final battle happens, or at least the siege of Rohan and and Rohan in general, including their fortress. Oh God, I have a blind blank all of a sudden.
Helm's Deep, Hornburg.
Helm's Deep, yep, Hornburg. That the age of the Uruks at that time would have only been aged 20 to 29 years of age at that point, and so they would have been basically, maybe one generation,
Young.
maybe possibly two generations. Yeah, in other words, yes, they were built to be strong, but they had no prior uh, experience in combat, other than a few, skirmishes in the
Raids and such. The
the raids and
Westfold and
stuff.
yeah.
Yes, they were, and those were 50 to 100 at a time. But this was 10,000 very strong Uruks who had never been tried in battle. This is what Jackson was trying to capture, which was these big Uruks who didn't have very much experience. They had a lot of equipment, but they didn't have a lot of experience, and they thought that the numbers would carry them. So any Uruk that was bred after 3010, just 9 years before what we saw in the movies, would have only been 9 years old at the time, and not it wouldn't have been part of the war. So there was a very small, genealogical, what you would call generational gap right there, in which these 10,000 were bred. Now I did some calculations on that. That means that they bred about 500 per year for 20 years, and there were no trolls. There were no evidence of any trolls being bred there or imported to this area for this battle. These were basically servant orcs, but mostly helping them to make uruks. So about 500 per year in the mud pits.
And
deeper,
men too. He had Dunlendings as well.
He had Dunlendings also. Yeah. That's correct. Now that leads us to the next point, which there was a lot of these uruks had been made probably from captured women from the Westfold.
Right, let's not go too far down that road for the sake of YouTube. Right.
Okay. So outside of that, the garrison looks to be based on the fact that it's 5,000 feet wide. That mathematically means in geometry, it means it was 15,700 feet in circumference, which is just over 3 miles in circumference. It had a diameter from one side to the other of about 500 feet in diameter, which we know, and or 5,000 feet. And the Tower of Orthanc itself was 500 feet tall itself.
Okay, to the top. Let me stop you here because a lot of stuff came in from the chat room here. So let's see. Tommy asked if the purpose of Orthanc, the actual spire there, may have been like a second mental Tarma to talk to Eru, and I would say probably not, because the time period, this was the faithless Numenorians that were colonizing Middle Earth and sort of taking over. They weren't talking to Eru really. They weren't going up the mental Tarma except as ceremony. They didn't really have that faith anymore. David asks, and this I don't have an answer for this. I want to kick this over to you guys. Could the material that made Orthanc, which we're discussing it being a mixture of granite and obsidian, be the same material that made up the walls of Minas Tirith? I would hazard a guess as to no, because that was described as being white in color, but I want your thoughts, guys.
White Sid? In color and not colored.
I have two thoughts there. One is no, the white versus basalt or almost basalt colored. But I want to throw in a wild card here. I have seen a picture drawn by Tolkien himself of Orthanc, and it surprised the heck out of me, because I had always pictured literally sheer obsidian as if it was one block 500 feet tall. But Tolkien's picture was made of large blocks of this black material, and with seams like a pyramid or a Roman or Greek temple. And so it's very interesting that the visual he drew was quite different than
I'm gonna put it on. I'm gonna put it on the screen, okay?
Oh,
so
great.
Just give me one moment to do that. I have to go to a different scene for this, but I want to. Here, just ignore that it says all that. I just want to show this. Where is that?
That was the power washers cleaning Orthanc out.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I just needed this screen because it has my which I can't seem to find, my display capture. There it is. So this is the drawing of the Tower of Orthanc that was made by J.R.R. Tolkien. And it's a good point that it's not... It's interesting, though, because it was described as almost looking like it was part of the Earth, which was what he wrote. But this is what he drew. And, yeah, it's got different levels to it. It's got, battlements.
The levels and battlements weren't a total surprise, but the fact that what's from the ground up to the first battlement is blocks of stone with crevices. Yeah. That was the total surprise.
Very like giant cinder blocks or bricks, very similar to his drawing of Barad-dûr, actually, which we only saw the base of. So that is a wild card. That does throw a different sort of. It also makes it believable in terms of construction.
Yeah. Now let me get back to the walls, because this gets back to, now I'm at the point of answering Sid's earlier question. The walls were 50 feet high. and they were 20 feet thick. And we know that Ents are described in the legendarium as at least 14 feet tall. They were able to break the doors, but they had to be able to walk through them without bending. So we know that the doors
they can't bend.
They can't
Exactly.
bend. And if I looked at the research on doors and walls and the medieval style, which Tolkien bases a lot of his works. And my estimate, if I had to guess, from what I've researched, is that the doors were probably 25 feet tall and about 50 feet wide. The ends who were 14 to 20 plus feet were able to get through them without bending. It also is proportionally accurate for how, if the walls were 50 feet high, that the gates would be about half that. And they'd be, both of the gates would be double width, so 25 feet high, 50 feet across. They were described in the Legendarium as being massive. So, but they were eventually destroyed by the onslaught of the Hurons and the Ents. Now, when you get back to construction...
Matt, before you go on, there's something that came up from the chat, and I actually wanted to kick it over to Sid, because I think this is sort of his wheelhouse. Fuseblower brings up that Tolkien's drawing there that we saw, that I put on the screen briefly, of Orthanc is sort of similar to Bruegel's painting of the Tower of Babel, which I think is probably a conscious effort on the professor's part. Do you think that there is a sort of a literary connection? Because somebody asked about it being a second Meneltarma, and that's not true. But is it sort of an analog for the Tower of Babel of the Númenóreans being a little bit too haughty and trying to get too high up?
I think, yes, and I think that reflects both the Númenóreans and also Saruman. And remember, Saruman's power was his voice, and the problem with the Tower of Babel, the destruction of the Tower of Babel, came by creating multiple human languages, so people couldn't understand and work together and cooperate. And Saruman's voice had the power to try to oppose that and speak to everyone in a way that was utterly entrancing. So yeah, I think there's a very interesting symbolic connection there.
If I was to say if the professor said on this show, he appeared for a few minutes and it said that was exactly his intent, I wouldn't, obviously it wouldn't surprise me. But I think there's something to that. I think Tolkien was intentional about what he drew, and considering his period of time he lived, these sketches of the Tower of Babel were very common. I mean, I have to remember that he was a man of the Victorian age, and at the time these sketched black and white pictures of the Tower of Babel are very, very similar to that. So the person who made the comment knows his history.
Yep. That's why I was like, I had to cut in and highlight that comment because it was so good.
Yeah. Now, I want to point out that these sizes, there's a typical size and a historical basis and commonality in barracks being stored in the walls of medieval castles, provided they're big enough. Now, if it's 20 feet thick, which all the indications from, we have the descriptions and the size and other things that have described what this is that if it was 5 feet thick and 5 feet thick on the backside and 5 feet thick on the front, that there was 10 feet in the middle that could have been used for barracks all the way around the circumference of this fortress, which would have easily been able to hold 10 to 12,000 men, or orcs or Númenóreans. Remember that the Númenóreans being 7 foot tall, so the bunks that would have been in the middle of these things would have had to have been at least 10 feet to be able to be livable and to be, because there was no outhouses at the time when it was built. And all these guys were not stored and housed inside the Tower of Orthanc or underground. Númenóreans didn't like underground stuff. That wasn't their style. But the fortress walls itself definitely were big enough, according to historical references and sources, to have their barracks inside the wall where they would be needed. They could go outside, inside, they could depart, whatever. And so there would be enough to have a garrison of 2,000 men plus another 5,000 soldiers. Now, this gets me to an interesting point. This means that from the ramparts, looking downward, you could have 5,000 archers, and Numenorians were famed in Legendarium for having a high proportionality of archers in their army.
Just Matt,
I
just
estimate.
1 second. I'm going to pause the timer. I just realized that I made a mistake because I was not wanting to interrupt you, and I was answering a few things on the chat, and I realized that I had not switched my account to the account that I'm broadcasting from. So just so you guys know, when you see NecroVMX in the chat, that's me, okay, answering you. So I was just answering a question about the Ensign and Isengard, and I was relating it to Barad-dûr and the elves and everything, and I was like, wait a minute, that's the wrong account, so people probably don't even know that that's me saying that. So yeah, whenever you see that guy with the green icon where I'm holding up the coffee mug, that's me. I even... Oh, I don't have that mug on me. Well, you have nearly 5 minutes left. I just wanted to point that out, that is me in the chat, and then I paused the thing. So I'm going to go ahead. 4 minutes 42 seconds. Go ahead.
I'm almost done, and I'll open this up. This means that if a garrison of about 2,000, which is about typical for normal, I think that when the 10,000 Uruks left, there was probably about 2,000 left behind to manage its defenses and operations and things. I did some research on that. That seems to be about right. But if they're all at Isengard at one time, including the garrison, that's about 12, maybe 15,000 maximum that could be housed there. But this means that under the Numenorians model, which is up to a half of their mobile army were archers, which is almost like the Mongol army of archers, that every 3 feet there could be an archer all around the circumference of this, basically an archer every 3 feet around this 3+ mile ring of circumference of this fortress. Sounds about right for the Numenorians.
Yeah. So what you're saying is nobody is going to get this fortress pregnant.
That's correct. Now, last thing. If you go back in time for how they built this before they had a lot of underground, and this is just what the fortress looks like as far as how many people they can house. You're talking about 12 to 15,000 Numenorians, with half of them being archers. There's nobody getting into that fortress. I mean, it's crazy. Now, the last thing I'll say in conclusion is, this is why this fortress is so important for Sauron. If he has this fortress in this area, and it's manned by this kind of garrison of 12 to 15,000, possibly 20,000 orcs, you're going to have a very difficult time besieging this fortress. And I just wanted the audience to know how the numbers come out to what this place looked like, what it was built for, why Sauron wanted it, why Saruman was there, why he took the key and occupied this place, and why he built it to do what it was going to do in the future, what he thought was going to be the future of he and Sauron dominating Middle-earth. So there's my presentation.
Okay. With 2 minutes left, I'm going to kick it over to Sid first, and then I'm going to address a bunch of the stuff that came through in chat.
2 very short thoughts. I love what you've done, Matt. Great. One is not just orcs, but Saruman would have had that many Uruk-hai. So man-sized, powerful warriors. And 2, thinking about the size of the gates, it makes sense. Those gates had to do 2 things. They had to let out an entire army, including pulling things like catapults.
Yeah.
There was large stuff that had to move through them. And also, you wanted to be able to get 5,000 or 10,000 men out in a few hours. So that's why they would have been so high and so wide, both in real medieval times and also in the Second and Third Ages. I'm done.
Yeah. So just
one intermission thought, John,
okay.
Real quick. I forgot one thing, John. Sorry. The only gates in Isengard were south facing. There was only one set of gates, just so everyone knows. Okay.
Okay, just to bring in a few things from the chat now. Lord Anubizg, I think, is saying, just to remind you guys, since somebody mentioned Minas Tirith before, the book tells us that the outer wall is indeed similar to Orthanc, and I would agree, similar in strength and durability and construction, but not the same material, because we were told that it is like a pearly white, whereas Orthanc is almost like a granite, extremely dark gray to black. Now, when I mentioned nobody can get in an impregnable fortress, Tommy there made an excellent joke, except maybe for a little burglar named Bilbo. And thank you for your kind words, Tony. Tony here said, John, I'm a drunk German, and you have kept me sleeping with your reading things. Thank you. I'm glad that you're able to fall asleep to the dulcet sounds of my voice, especially if you're following along with, let me just stop the timer because we're out of time anyway, with the Two Towers, and when I do the tree bear voice, let us not be hasty. And Chris brings up an excellent point about, and I want to jump off what Chris is saying here, because the number 10,000 comes up so many times, and if you notice that it happens a lot in Tolkien's writing, that estimations of armies caps out at 10,000. He never uses a number bigger than that. He'll say 10,000 or more, just to let you know, really, really big. And Chris brings up the point. You're only talking about warriors. There's cooks, there's people doing laundry, there's farmers, there's cleaning people, people mucking out stables. There are stables. There's a lot of other, and I think that goes into a lot of the underground stuff too, not just the ring of Isengard. Tommy says
that's why I said 2,000 in garrison.
Yeah, and Tommy says that Matt, you did a great job of visualizing Orthanc, and helps him be able to imagine the grand size of the fortress while reading. Tony wants to know what we think of Discworld. I haven't read Discworld, although it has been extremely recommended to me. Have either of you guys done that?
No, but maybe Chris wants to chime in.
Okay, well, and Lord there on the Twitch side, posted that the outer walls of Minas Tirith were like to the Tower of Orthanc, hard and dark and smooth, unconquerable by steel or fire, unbreakable by some convulsion that would rend the very earth by which it stood. That is true, but like I said, there are noticeable differences, and I don't know if you were here for when I brought up the image of what Tolkien drew Orthanc as. He didn't draw it as smooth. Perhaps it's a potluck army? Well, I ain't had nothing but maggoty bread for 3 days.
I'm all for the professor and his drawings. Don't get me wrong. I agree with that. But I got to tell you, Jackson's Orthanc Tower and Fortress rendition on the movie.
Actually, Chris, Sorry, go ahead. That's my call, and I say go ahead. Chris wants to name her fanfic on AO3. Okay, so we're out of time here for that section. That was really fun. We're gonna take just a very brief little respite here to just give us 2 minutes to. I gotta go to the bathroom, so that's really what we need to do.
This is where Sid and I talk about anything we want to talk about over the last couple segments.
Well, you've got about a minute. I'll be right back.
Sid, go ahead.
No, you lead us on.
Well, while he's gone, I would just say that when I think about the breeding pits that were made, and how hurriedly he made them to be able to field this army, really shows how easily they were defeated when Éomer's host of the Rohirrim showed back up again. They weren't expecting that, and this is why they were big and deadly and dangerous looking, but they were a bunch of lugs, and they got wiped out by experienced warriors.
I would say 2 things. One, Chris's fanfic is very relevant to possibilities of how the Uruk-hai were created. So it's in the link. Go take a look at it. And number two is, I think there may have been one exception. What if he was able to breed one group of elite warriors, and those are the ones who went to the Anduin and fought and killed Boromir and such? Because those did seem like worthy enemies for Aragorn and Boromir. So I suspect he had an elite, very fast, very skilled bunch of fighters, but maybe he had one or two of those, and the rest were, like you say, far deeply undertrained.
Well, I think there's a combination of two things that happened. That's the merging of those two ideas. I think this group of 50 to 100 that went after the Fellowship were possibly their oldest and first batch. And I think they had the benefit of the most amount of years of training. They couldn't, in my opinion, in my research, they could not have been older than 25 to 30 years old from when this started. Even if he had started right away, I think maybe 20 years old is probably about right. But they were the oldest of the group, just barely enough to be functional in the field on their own under one commander. And I think that that was the group that he probably did have about 50 to 100 that were capable of doing all that.
1 second. Please don't put links in the chat. Don't do that.
One thought though, Matt, if they were the first...
Ask first before you do that.
They spent 20 years training all the others. And so they could have been incredibly battle ready. And also, we don't know how long it takes an orc or an Uruk-hai to mature to fighting age. So, 20 might be 12 years of adulthood.
Well, I was accounting for that. So I was accounting for that in my research. I think that by the time because this is 20 years, so by the time they're 20, they're even in the first or second batch was all they had time to produce. These guys would have been barely mature, even at 18 years old, and 10,000 of them, yes, mature, but only to the degree that a 17-year-old or 20-year-old in their first combat, really?
I kind of came in the middle here, but I want to say that orcs do live a long time. From what we know of, Bolg was at least 140 years old when he died. I just want to just address a few things from chat. I did really like that picture, Lord. That's based more on the films than the books, but that's a beautiful picture. Just please don't post any links into the chat without asking first. Tony asked if hobbits brew proper beer. I don't know what you would consider to be proper beer, but they certainly do brew beer. They're really big on that. It's definitely their favorite beverage. And Tommy posted, if anybody's interested, a recipe for maggoty bread, if anybody wants to make maggoty bread.
Oh, yum.
Which appears to be a form of lard bread with weevils in it.
I have a couple of comments about beer that will go back ancient. The most ancient breweries of the most ancient recipes, and here's one of them, Frauk, made in Scotland. It's made from heather. It's spelled F-R-O-A-C-H. It's made from heather. It's the oldest recipe of beer in the world before mead. And the other one is...
Mead isn't beer, but go on.
Oh, I know, but it's made from mead beer. But the other one is a brand of beer called 1776. And if you can find it online, I highly recommend you freaking buy a case. You can thank me later, because that is the way they made it in the 1700s in the Americas.
Matt, next month, could you please spend your entire time talking about brewing?
Yeah, that beer that you're talking about, the Frauk Ale, that goes quite a bit further back than 17th century.
Frau is 5,000 years old.
Yeah, it's quite. I mean, that's one of the oldest types of beer out there. Although they were brewing beer as well in places like ancient Egypt and what now.
Two breweries. There's only 2 breweries in Scotland. I've actually had it, and it is the purest, cleanest, sweetest beer I've ever had. And if you can find it and get it, I would look to get it. But anyway, those 2 beers would have been my recommendation for what a proper hobbit would brew.
I feel that they would be heavy into wheat ales and stouts as well.
Sure.
But yeah,
Well,
beer.
1776 is really
Yeah,
like that.
beer is really like their main beverage. Really, they drink other things, but that's like the main thing that they drink. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and if I can find my timer, we're going to set it for 2 minutes. And Sid, I almost said Matt. We just got done with Matt's section. Sid, you're going to go ahead and intro your section starting now.
Werewolves begone. Dimensions of Isengard appreciated. Let's talk about God.
Oh no! I know what he's saying.
Here's my short question to get us going. Tolkien tells us in his letters that only 2 characters in all his works are specifically linked to what he would call real beings. One is Morgoth, Tolkien's Satan figure. The other is Eru, which is the name Tolkien gives to the one creator god of the Abrahamic faith. This makes the Silmarillion a religious epic with only one other literary equivalent, Milton's Paradise Lost, where God appears as the quote-unquote author of the universe. But Eru is not an author. He is the creator of a symphony, the music of the Ainur, as seen in the Ainulindalë early in the book, The Silmarillion. How does our understanding of God change when we see him as the founder of an orchestra, a musical producer, a trainer of the musicians, a composer and a conductor, rather than an author? I'm done unless you want me to reread that question.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
We're done there. I wanted to say, by the way, when you said he's not an author, I had to repress the urge to say he's a maestro.
Yes, you're heading in the right direction.
Okay.
Great.
All right, I'm going to set us up with a half hour here. So I know you want to start off because we talked a little bit about the structure here, is that Sid is going to go through his presentation and then at certain points say thoughts, and that's or any input, and that's where me or Matt or the chat can sort of go in there. All right, go ahead.
But that was it, input. You guys go.
Oh, well, from that, yeah, I mean, I know that a little bit about what you're going to talk about because I helped you with workshop a little bit of the structure here earlier. But I want to say that, it is interesting, the connection to Paradise Lost and God as author, as opposed to the Silmarillion and Iluvatar or Eru, depending on, which name you like better, as sort of the maestro, and the angels, the holy ones, the Ainur, as being the ones that did the actual singing. But it still necessitates Iluvatar to make it real. They didn't make it real, they only sketched it out. And that is why when he did create the universe, Ea, and the world, Arda, he said, "Behold your music." And they were his themes, as well as the themes of all of the Ainur, including Melkor, woven into the very fabric of reality. So it's a sort of a demiurgic take on it, admittedly, by Tolkien's own words, but still we must also keep in mind that, and you said this, Sid, that it's a religious epic. This is the world the way the elves see it. The religious epics we have are the world, that's the world the way that we see it.
Matt, would you like to add anything?
Oh yeah, I got a real beauty for you. The Ainulindalë is the way I pronounce it. The Ainulindalë is the great music, obviously. But instead of saying "Behold your creation," there's a concept in philosophy that is directly attributed and studied according to St. Thomas Aquinas, which is a theory of gradation. That's what he calls it. It's called the theory of gradation. And I think of this as "behold your gradation." Gradation. 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 The theory of gradation is that you can create a space, but you cannot actually have creativity unless you allow other beings to make their own things according to what they think should be made within that space of creation, according to their own free will. In
Very
other
much dead
words,
on. Yeah.
dead on, right? So the idea that this whole idea that Tolkien encouraged subcreation is so cool because he's writing about it in the Silmarillion, in the Ainulindale, from the very foundations of what he believes, comes directly from St. Thomas Aquinas. You can look it up, stamp it, and send it in the mail. It is exactly what he's talking about. He's a Roman Catholic. He's talking about the theory of gradation of St. Thomas Aquinas. And it says that if there's all these different grades of color and size, fashion, form, immutable form, mutable form, that the survival of the fittest and the development of the species and all of this is basically by design. That there is creation, but that the development of the survivability of the species is designed also as a part of the system. And so, behold, the gradation is this idea that the Ainur are going to create these different things and come up with their different ways of making different beings, different things that are also going to then propagate themselves into perpetuity, that are not going to die. And this is Tolkien's great concept from Catholicism in a way. But I don't think that it's necessarily just Catholicism. It's really about creation. I mean, if he was to come up with everything on his own, it would be so Unitarian that it would lack free will. It would only be his will. So what he's actually doing is saying, I want this to actually be a produced concept of a world that came from other persuasions, other sensitivities, other emotions, other abilities, other things that are specialized, like, Aule. And I want them to create all of this and come up with this so that it's truly a mosaic, a uniquely made mosaic of free will, so that it is indeed living on its own. And that is what's going on here.
Okay.
Thank you. That is absolutely great.
We have input from the chat as well.
Well, as you say, thank you for the idea of gradation. It advances the next questions I'll be asking. Go ahead.
So from the
John.
chat, for Tony's question, I just want to say that I don't think any of us are qualified to answer that one. Tommy is asking, are we to understand that Eru is or was omniscient, as in he already knew that Melkor was evil and that there would be all this suffering in Middle-earth? Yes, and I answered this in the chat already before we got a break. He knew how it would end, and he said that this is the lesson for Melkor. You will see all the secret thoughts of your mind, and you will see all the parts played out until the end. And you will understand that I am Eru, and that no one has any power that doesn't have its origin in me. So they are even Melkor. Go ahead, Sid. Yeah.
I agree with what you're saying, that Eru mastered it all from the moment that Melkor broke the theme and went out of tune. But I actually believe that omniscience doesn't always mean prescience, and that because Melkor had free will until the moment he went out of tune, I don't believe that even the creator God himself knew that was going to happen. He had hoped for a music that was the one he composed and was orchestrating.
I agree.
So we have a difference there.
I agree that omniscience and prescience are two different things. And I would say that the creation of the world itself is like he's almost saying to Melkor, is this how you're going to act? I'm going to show you the results. And he played for them a vision of the world playing out, but then veiled from them the ending. Only he knows the ending and what the true meaning of the third theme is.
Agreed.
Yeah. Did he technically create evil? The evil is really just anything that is discordant with his themes. He created themes. Melkor created evil. Now, he created Melkor he created Melkor, but he didn't create him as evil. It's like what Elrond said in The Lord of the Rings. Nothing is evil in the beginning.
Yeah. And so, but the problem is if you give people or beings, angels, whatever, free will, they're free to disobey you. That's part of the deal.
Yes.
It's just like
100%.
if you're hiring to train a bunch of musicians, you can't stop what they're going to play when the orchestra comes up. That's why this analogy of composer and conductor is so profound and better than author, because if they're all authors, and we're just characters in a book with no free will, but he is a creator of creative beings.
Yeah.
And that changes the game for his role. May I go ahead to the next question?
I just want to bounce off what you said. Melkor's failing was that he was too creative for his own good. He was impatient. He wished to fill the void with all manner of beings of his own thoughts. He couldn't wait. And you see this happen a lot. You see it happen with Aula as well, although Aula repented and found forgiveness. But he wanted to make the world in his own image. He wanted to be Iluvatar.
Yes. And actually, impatience is the first step in any fall. And it's as far as Gandalf the Grey went, but he went no further. But Tolkien explains why impatience is inevitable. This is one of my notes further down, but I'll bring it up here.
Real quick, let me say something before you start your next section. Before your next section, Eru allows and knows that evil grades within gradation are possible. Not that they're predicted, but they're predicted as being possible because of free choice.
Exactly.
He didn't know, but knew it was possible. And he allowed it to happen because, in other words, he didn't create evil, but he allowed choice. And because he allowed choice, choosing evil became possible. Mm-hmm. But the true creative nature of everything that existed was not possible without free choice. So Eru decided to allow free choice to reign, knowing that this had to be of free will, in other words, love, because true love can only come from free will, not force and not prescription. Knowing that what was going to be made would be a holy, unique, and beautiful act of free choice, at the same time knowing that any one of them could play a discordant note in the middle of the goddamn symphony at the Scottish National Symphony on opening night. That any one of these players could play a bad note for 5 minutes before they had to have security come and escort them out of the building. But that's the whole idea of it.
Yeah, and Eru would always be able to handle that because he too is creative, so he can create a response to whatever happens. Want to come back to Tolkien on impatience. We're all impatient because no one understands the mind of Eru completely. He knows the story has to go on longer because everyone deserves a chance to repent. So the Third Age couldn't end until Gandalf spoke through the mouth of Sauron to Sauron saying, hey, you can walk out of here.
Yeah.
Come on.
That's big.
That was what, it couldn't happen until that moment. Now I want to come back to some thoughts about Eru as the author. And as I see it, Eru is now not an author, but as I say, the producer, creator of an orchestra. Rather than hiring musicians, he created them. We know he trained them. That's in the beginning of the album. He taught each of them how to sing or play their instrument, and then got them to the point where they could improvise before the Anil Dale. But what's fascinating to me is the reason this works is Eru is behind the scenes. He's silent. He speaks a few times. He never sings or plays a single note. So in this magnificent symphony, he does everything but make music. It is we who make the music. We angels, we humans, there are probably some elves in the audience. We make the music, and therefore he is a conductor, silent, creating the music, a symphony to be played however well or badly, and it becomes fully conflicted because of Melkor's unfortunate choice. Then we get to something later, and this is where we go next. That describes the island Dali and its display. But then Eru goes on to create a physical world with multiple ages. And I'm going to suggest the best metaphor here is that he said, okay, we have a symphony. And by the way, listen to Beethoven's Nights. It has a lot of the what's called leitmotif, Nebenmotif. Nebenmotif is the dark, dour mode of failure. Leitmotif is the uplifting response to it. And that's all in the Island Dali as music. But then when Eru creates Arda and sends the angels down to be musicians, creators in the material world, isn't that a lot like someone who wrote a symphony and then turned it into first an opera and then a series of musicals all the way up to a rock opera in the end? And each age is a new variation played out on stage of the original symphony. And this does two things. One, it says Eru's creation is different than ours because he silently creates creators of music. We create music. And second, if we go to the third age, we know what the Nebin motif was. Even after the second age and effort to bring Sauron to an end, he and the ring both still existed. And that is the dark motif. How will we bring the ring to destruction? We also know that the first time that hobbits appear, we don't know when they were created. We don't know when they woke from the caves they were created in. I'll talk about that a little more later, this week or next month if there isn't time. But
there's not going to be.
I think he created hobbits to arise in the Third Age as the leitmotif. The mortals who had certain innate qualities and capacities allow them to destroy the ring. And if I'll ask you guys to talk about that as I get one more idea before we're done.
Yeah, you'll be able to we have like about 14 minutes left, so you'll be able to get through one more. First of all, I want to go back to what you said about Iluvatar is silent during the Ainulindala. That is both supported and unsupported. And I don't know if you saw me grab the Silmarillion while you were talking. He does say, I will sit and hearken, and be glad that through you great beauty has been wakened into song, so that during the actual playing of the themes he is sitting and listening. However, he does, at the very beginning and between each, teach them the theme. He basically, and the way I always saw it, he gives them a little humming, now do something with that.
Yeah, like a conductor.
Yeah. Now, yes. Now, or a band leader saying, "Okay, let's start writing. I'm going to start. Now you do something with that."
Yeah.
Hobbits. Okay, I think I have to save most of my thoughts on hobbits for another time because I could take up a lot of time talking about that. And I believe that the hobbits were engineered by an agent of Iluvatar. And I wrote a whole thing about that I know you're familiar with. But what I wanted to mention was specifically about the hobbits is that they are offshoots of the race of men. We do know that from what Tolkien said in his letters, and what he also said in The New Shadow, which is, that's sort of like an unfinished little thing that he wrote with a little bit. They are essentially mortal men, and the Stores were probably the oldest of the three kinds of hobbits, because they the most resembled men, with their large hands and feet and their ability to grow facial hair, which is something that elves cannot do, and that Fallowhides cannot do, and that Harfoots cannot do. And I don't think that they came out of caves, because I think that they came out of I think that they were just born, but I do believe that they were somewhat engineered, and I have a lot of thoughts. I almost wish that we started with this, because it's so much.
That's for next month.
Yeah, that's for. So we're going to have to go to next month. But I basically just wanted to support you on the theme, like of the actual music and the motifs and everything, and that the children of Iluvatar, because the hobbits are the children of Iluvatar, maybe we can call them the grandchildren of Iluvatar, since they are the children of men. The children of Iluvatar were in the third theme, and it was specifically said that none of the angels, the Ainur, really understood the third theme. They didn't really get what was happening. And if we look at the countenance of Iluvatar throughout this, he's rather mirthful in the first two themes, but becomes angry and stern and terrible to behold when he starts creating the men and the elves.
And I think he develops a sense of humor when he develops the Hobbit. Matt, sorry I interrupted you.
You're good. I had thought the Hobbits, and I know what article John and his philosophy about Hobbits is getting at, and anybody who wants to research it, I'm 100% in agreement with his research on this. The Hobbits, for lack of a better term, are the yin, or the leitmotif, or even the kryptonite of the material world that has befallen the world by the end of the Lord of the Rings. They are the answer. They are the humble but yet powerful answer to what the world has become. And the powers of the world do not have a concept or understanding or answer for what the hobbits bring, all the way to the very end. And it's this idea that they are immune from the world, protected from the world. They're a harbinger, or not harbinger, but they're a hearkening of the old world, a protected class of beings. I think mostly protected by Tom Bombadil in his location for all of these ages that they were there.
I see Sid waving his hand, and I also want to say we're getting into some of the next month stuff there.
I know,
absolutely.
I'm just saying I'm just trying to fill out what Sid is getting at, and that is that there in the theory of gradation, there is always this grade that is allowed to go really, really, really dark, and there's the grade that's allowed to go really, really light. And in the end, it becomes the solution for the whole problem.
Yeah, and that's very and Tolkien's language for that is Nebben motif, response light motif. We're not bringing Bombadil I haven't even gotten to the Shire yet, guys. Yeah. You jumped into the next two.
Well, yeah, the Shire is definitely a later thing in Hobbit history.
Yeah. Can I just bring us down to just watching time?
Yeah. Well, let me.
Two more questions.
Yeah, you have 8 minutes, so go ahead.
Okay, two more questions. There is an idea in the first two books of Christopher's 10-book marathon that the elves and men were created in numbers, not just Adam and Eve, the way the dwarves were, 6 couples and a bachelor, but some numbers, whole tribes of men and elves were buried underground, souls already in bodies asleep. Melkor never found the elves, but he found the men. He went in and he told them dark stories, the main story being you're going to live a short life and die and you're gone. So they came to fear death.
And there's nothing beyond the world.
Exactly. There's nothing. Now, what I want to say here is I want to suggest the possibility that hobbits were bred in 3 caves the same way, Fallowhide, Stores, and I always forget the name of the other one.
Harfoots. Harfoots, Fallowhides, and Stures.
And whether there are 20 of each or 100 of each, small clan, that was what was created. They were created in caves. They slept in caves. I don't know whether could have been First Age, could have been not until the beginning of the Third Age. We don't know, and we can never know. But Melkor never found them. So he never directly poisoned hobbit minds. How did hobbits become mortally afraid? Melkor is, even after cast out of the world, he still is in the mind of every mortal being. So they are fallible, but not poisoned. And one more interesting point. A place called the Gladden Fields, also called the Vale of Anduin, is where the hobbits were first seen. It is where the ring fell. It is where the family of Stores that didn't like the Shire wandered back to. It's where Deagle and Smeagol wandered through and found the ring. It's where Sauron searched for the ring, and Bilbo passed right next to it on his adventure on the way into Mirkwood. So I'm going to suggest there's one central dramatic location of the Third Age, and that is where hobbits were first seen and where the ring first disappeared. And that is the unity of place that ties together the hobbits and the ring in the Third Age. So I want you guys to respond to the whole leitmotif, Nebben motif, and location idea. We'll get to Bombadil and the Shire next month.
Walter, just to answer Walter, we'll definitely talk about the Blue Wizards at some point. It's not going to be today, though. Location, the Gladden Fields is incredibly important for Hobbit and especially Sturish history, and it's absolutely, important to know that Deagle and Smeagol were Stures. And I believe it was Pippen was a bit Sturish himself. But I also believe that at some point previous to that they were extant to the area that we would call Rovanian, because the Eothiad, who later became the Rohirrim when they migrated to the south and took the land of Kalanarth and it became the Riddermark or Rohan, they had legends of halflings as sort of almost like fairy-ish creatures who breathed smoke. Of course, we know they don't. That was just them smoking, and which suggests that they could have been there as early as late Second Age, and I believe the Stures are definitely, and therefore also the Tooks, and this is really important. The Tooks are indigenous to the Gladden Fields, but I think the other kinds, the Fallowhides and the Harfoots, may have come from elsewhere, especially from Rovanian. And the reason I think that is because only the Stores ever really mess around with boats and water. The other hobbits are terrified of boats and water. Look at Samwise. He's a Harfoot. He can't even hold an oar. He's terrified. The only time that he found the courage to be in a boat and not be a quivering pile of jelly is when it was all about helping Mr. Frodo get away from Mr. Boromir.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Chris, it was an old Eothiad legend that there were these halflings that breathed smoke. Of course, we know that they don't actually breathe smoke, but it was that they had been seen from like a distance, probably smoking, and this was sort of the mannish legend that arose from them. And keep in mind that by the time Rohan comes around, they thought of halflings as being mythical, as not actually existing, and that's why Merry and Theoden became such good friends, because they were he knew his lore. But Matt, did you have anything before I kick it back to Sid?
No, I agree with. I mean, I have nothing to add other than I agree with both of where you're going with this and what you've said.
Okay. Go ahead, Sid. I know you have
Okay.
one more thing you want to get through.
No, actually, I just gave them. Let me find one more. Well, I guess I want to come back to, if this is all the case, what does it tell us about Eru? Because I think there are some themes here. One, he is the non-musical creator of music. He is the creator of creative musicians, and he is behind the scenes. So what is his role when the ages arrive and they're in Arda, and it isn't just music, it's a play, an opera. Maybe the first age was an opera, the next one was a musical, and the third age was a rock musical. Who knows? But it's different each time. And in one case, and I think one case only, he created a new subrace, the hobbits, as the leitmotif. We've just agreed on all of that. Also, remember that a conductor guides the orchestra with little waves of his hand. And think how important it is. Gandalf the White gained the power to cause action and difference with a single gesture of his hand. Elrond over and over talks about, while the wise are looking elsewhere, small hands do their work. Frodo is nine-fingered, Beren is one-handed. So I'm going to suggest is that what we're learning is, unlike all the musicians and actors, that's us in the world, Eru takes two jobs. He creates species, and occasionally he moves a small hand, like Bilbo's hand under the Misty Mountains, fumbling to find a ring. And we can start to understand Eru as a great and tiny mover, but not in between. We are the in-between. I'm done.
I'm going to just stop the timer because it's only 20 seconds at this point anyway, and we're going to start our wrapping up. It's interesting. The one thing that you said, the only thing that you said that I really disagree with is that Eru is non-musical. I would say that he's very musical. It's just that the world is the music of the Holy Ones, the music of the Ainur. Obviously, and you even said it, he taught them how to play music. He gave them their voices, and their voices were like many different instruments. So I think...
Let me correct myself. I simply meant we never hear him do anything musical in the history of either the Ainur and Dale or the later ages.
And it's always been
music through his musicians.
It's been my thought that we'll hear his voice in the second Ainur Lindala, the one that our voices will be a part of.
Let's hope so. And may it be soon.
Well, maybe not super soon. I'm not ready for the world to end just yet.
Oh, I'm getting tired.
You're getting tired? Hey, well, we know you're not an elf because they don't get tired until it was like a million years or 10,000 centuries, as Tolkien put it.
Elrond got kind of tired.
Elrond was tired of missing his wife, I think.
You know who really got tired was Fingelfen. He was tired.
To answer Tony's question, how the Shire's economy works, where did the hobbits get their cheese and their ale and their other goods? They were pretty self-sufficient. They made all that stuff themselves. They had the farms, they had the mills, they had all the dairy and stuff. They even, like in the late Third Age when they were closing themselves off from the outside world, they were pretty self-sufficient.
Actually, John, I'd like to ask you a question about something that came up in the forum. Early on, you said so and so. That's a question I think none of us can answer. Can we at least hear the question?
Let me bring it up. Yeah, hold on. That was, I believe it was Tony or Tommy, one of those two. It was sort of asking what the Muslim perspective on Iluvatar would be. And like I said, we're not scholars of that particular religion.
Actually, my wife is. Let me give a one sentence.
Oh, okay. There you go. Well, she's in the chat.
My wife, but she talks long.
Okay. She was in the chat.
I'll give her. We can give her a 2-minute time next month. But anyway, my wife is a scholar of the Abrahamic faith. That is Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Tolkien never spoke about Islam, but he would have considered Allah to be another name of
It was Tony. Okay.
YHVH. And so we can incorporate the idea of an Abrahamic God and say, yes, Islam is a part of that picture, but because Tolkien never addressed it, and why not? Because he didn't know the language. He never read about anything unless he could read the original.
He would. So he would have wanted to read it in Arabic and Hebrew.
Exactly.
You know what? Why don't we do? Okay, so Chris said that she knows something about Islam, but is not a scholar of it. But if you're interested, Chris, what you could do is, if you want to write just like a little bit of an answer to what you think the Muslim perspective on Iluvatar could be, and send it to Sid to integrate into the next month, because Sid is going to be continuing, even though we're ending the segment here. There's going to be a little bit of continuity over the next 2 months, not for me and Matt, but for Sid's sections, to continue this, because it's really too much for 1 month.
Yeah, and next month will be the Shire.
I have a thought about this.
Let me answer. Let me answer Walter's question, and then I'm going to kick it over to Matt for his sort of final thoughts here. Walter's question was about Eru. If Ael made his swords from star metal, which meteoric iron is really what it was, did Eru send that star down to Middle-earth for Ael to forge? Now, this is really interesting, and we could talk about it for a long time, but I'm going to believe yes, and the reason that I'm going to say yes is because one of the 2 swords that were forged from that meteoric iron was a sword that Ael called Anglachel, which was later reforged and called Gurthang. And this is the sword that the elves believe will kill Morgoth in the final battle.
And also killed Glaurung.
Yes, it did kill Glaurung, yes. But it was tainted by the accidental slaying of an elf, so it needs to be blessed by Eru to become holy again. Melian said she felt a dark presence in it, but I would say yes to that. That would be my... Okay, Matt, go ahead. You had some thoughts here.
Well, I taught this in college for a number of years, and the Islamic answer to the question of Eru would be that Eru created everything, and that he would beget no other beings to create anything. So in the Islamic tradition, there would be no helpers that we would call the Valar that would have helped Eru create anything. So he would have done it all on his own.
Might they have been called prophets then?
No, prophets aren't creators. They are message givers of Allah's message.
I don't think that's a uniquely Muslim view, but I always do have to say that, like I said, the Silmarillion is the elves' religion. It's not our religion.
That's true. Yeah. But I'm just saying what would be, what they would believe in their minds. Now, the Christian view is that God, Yahweh, or God the Creator, can do anything he wants. He can make Vala help him. He can ask them to do this for free will. He can beget a spirit to become into the world and speak in Aramaic to deliver his message. But these are the conflicts between Islam and Christianity about what God can do. And the Islamic faith is that Allah does everything. That's all there is. And the Christian belief is that that God, Allah, can do whatever he wants and make whatever he wants because he is Allah, because he's the creator God.
I think the core difference.
I need to clarify one point. There are angels in Islam.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, of course.
They're just not creators.
Because an angel delivered the Quran, but
they're conveyors.
Yeah.
And some Christians hold the same view. They are obedient conveyors of God's light and message.
When it comes down to it, the Silmarillion is awfully Gnostic. When it comes down to it, that would be the closest approximation.
To Tolkien would hate that.
I know he would,
He would
but
hate that word.
but he
John's right.
he did use the term demiurgic in his writings, in his letters. So he'd hate it, but that would be the kind of thing he would say. I hate that you're right about it. I hate that.
I know. I really don't think so. Just one fact I want people to know: Tolkien wrote numerous letters, and John, you may remember the name, to a Jesuit priest. And he vetted every single idea. The name should come to me, but I'm tired.
It's not Peter Hastings, but I'm bringing it up. Hold on.
No. He checked every theological point with a Jesuit priest. He placed it all before the time of Abraham. So it's really in the Noahide period, to avoid any conflict with Judaism or Christianity. And
Robert Murray was the name we're looking for.
Yeah, Robert Murray, yes.
Yeah.
Society of Jesus. Thank you. And so, no, he was very, very careful to be utterly canonical in his ideas and avoid anything that would collide with anyone from Abraham on.
And Tolkien was respectful of a lot of different religious perspectives as well.
Yes,
Absolutely. He was Catholic, but he wasn't militaristic, militant Catholic. He was a man of faith for sure. But he
was very happy when C.S. Lewis, through his influence, returned to the Anglican faith.
Yeah, I mean he jibed at him. I wish he would have become Catholic, but he didn't say, "Oh, you chose wrong" or anything like that, because he knew that religion is a very personal thing. What religion you want to have, if any, is a completely personal thing. That being said, I think this is we got to wrap this up now. So
actually, I need to add one. Let me add one final note.
Yeah, well, but that's
okay.
I was going to say.
Sorry,
I was going to go to you first for final thoughts.
Okay.
So Sid, go ahead. Since you went last, we'll have you go first.
I just want to acknowledge. Thank you for that reference. To everyone in the audience who is not religious or not Christian or not of the Abrahamic faiths, I think there's a wonderful gift. We can explore the fictional creation Eru and learn more about, you pick, are we learning more about God, an actual creator, or are we learning more about the Christian idea of God? Both are worth doing, because even if it's just an idea, it's an idea that has an enormous influence on the Western world for thousands of years and the whole world still.
You can study something without adopting it.
So I want to invite the atheists, agnostics, Buddhists, like me.
Sid is Buddhist, in case anybody didn't know.
I'm also Christian and Jewish, and a little bit Sufi, and I do Hindu yoga.
There you go.
And I'm a big fan. I'm a participant in the Aboriginal religions as well.
So
I'm not kidding.
No, he's not kidding. He's not kidding. Sid is just deeply spiritual. Just to answer Tony's last religious question, is there any chance that Tolkien's books could be a whole religion in like 500 years, or if Tolkien's finished books, if they found the writings? Look, there are people right now that practice a sort of Buddhist adjacent faith called Jediism, and it's based on Star Wars that came out in the 70s. So yes, it could happen today. Absolutely.
But also, there were at one point a group of people in England who were actually recreating the faith of the elves and had elvish prayers and ceremonies. Yes. I don't know if they've kept it up.
It'd be an interesting thing to look into. Matt, go ahead.
This a lot of people don't know this, but there is a huge. Everyone thinks that this is all based in Catholicism and a little bit of Buddhism and everything. But hold on a second. Hold the show.
Oh here. No! Don't get him started.
It is basically I would say about 1/3 to 40%
Zoroastrian.
Zoroastrianism.
Zoroastrianism. I knew you were going to say it. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Zoroastrianism.
Okay.
It is the belief in the Jediism is also from that. If you research the influences on Star Wars and the author of Star Wars,
George Lucas.
What's his name? George Lucas. Yeah. He is credited Tolkien with being super influential with him, and this is Zoroastrian in base nature because it's the struggle between the dark and the light forces in our souls that represents the struggle of the dark and light forces in the cosmos.
And before stop, Matt. Before he gets too much into it, because it's wonderful, and we don't have the time because we are ending. Matt wrote a really great paper on this that you should seek out loremaster.com or look him up, Loremaster, on Quora, about the Zoroastrian influences in Tolkien's work. I helped him edit it. It's really good, and I highly recommend it. And by the way, Tony specifically thanked you, Matt, for your nuanced perspective on the Islamic question of Tolkien's work. And Chris searched for Islam and the Lord of the Rings on DuckDuckGo and found much interest and respect, strong statement of shared values and such. So, yeah, Tolkien's pretty universal. Very few people get upset at him, really, for his morality or anything like that.
Which is amazing, given that he was also extremely careful to be an Orthodox Catholic in everything he did. And that actually comes to what he and Lewis agreed was their entire literary life purpose, to pass on the core ethos of Christianity to a generation, particularly in the UK, who were no longer explicitly Christian. And they did it in very different ways, but that was their shared life mission.
Historical note, anybody who's curious about how Islam got the symbol of the crescent moon and the star, it's a holdover from Zoroastrianism.
Zoroastrianism. It's a hard word to say.
I don't know why. Zoroastrianism, because the belief is that the struggle in the cosmos is the struggle of the soul between good and evil, and the eclipse of the moon and the crescent moon is a symbol of that struggle, and the star is of the heavens leading you to righteousness. And so the crescent moon is a picture of the eclipse, the moon eclipsing the sun, the earth eclipsing the sun, and creating a this crescent moon that embodies the struggle of good versus evil, and your emotional, personal struggle to choose the light of the truth of God and Allah, which is also harmonious with the Abrahamic faiths of Christianity and Judaism. But this is ancient stuff, and we're in a format right now where this stuff's got to be talked about because that's the history of it. It doesn't matter if you like it or not.
Let me do one sentence. C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy.
The Silent Planet Trilogy. Yeah.
The Silent Planet Trilogy, ending with That Hideous Strength, discusses the sublunar sphere in which Satan rules, although the rest of the universe is free. And what is it like to live in the sublunar sphere? If this stuff you're hearing now is interesting to you, you got to go read that.
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. And what's interesting is that story, that trilogy started out as a writing challenge that Lewis and Tolkien had to write science fiction. And in typical fashion, Tolkien started a wonderful story called The Lost Road, and in typical Tolkien fashion, he did not finish it. And in typical C.S. Lewis fashion, he quickly churned out 3 really fun books. So, that's just how it went.
Profound.
Yes.
Fun and profound.
Anybody who's just walking into this show or is wondering what the heck is going on here, this is one of the reasons. This show is a great reason of explaining, or a way to explain how brilliant Tolkien is. Mm-hmm. For anybody who's ever wondered what's the big deal about Tolkien, I mean, it's bigger than just with the written works. He's talking about deep, ancient stuff that influences influenced people like George Lucas and I'm sorry, what was that author of
Deep breath.
Harry Potter?
Oh, Rowling. Yeah, not such a fan of
Yeah,
hers.
Rowling. They both attributed both attributed a lot of their beliefs and their way of thinking of their writing to Tolkien and a lot of other authors. He's the granddaddy of them all, and he's really deep. So this shows a really great reason, an example of why Tolkien is so studied and so amazing.
Sid.
Let's add Ursula K. Le Guin to that list.
Yeah.
Because her writings on Tolkien, Taoist that she is.
Yes. Which is just another. It's another perspective. And just to say, I want to reply to a few things here. Walter said that Lewis definitely won the bet on that one. It wasn't a bet; it was a challenge. But I would say that they both won, that it was equal. Even though Tolkien did not finish The Lost Road, this is what came out of it, because in his time travel story, The Lost Road, he created an Atlantis analog that these future people would be traveling to called Numenor. And everything that came of Numenor came from that story. So we got a lot more of it than you would think. Bonnie Bell says the three of us are on fire tonight. It's been wonderful and enjoying the spiritual aspects of the conversation.
You mean Miss Plumb
Yes.
We're awesome?
Ms. Plumb says we're on fire. And
meet that lady.
Oh dear.
I do. I gotta tell you.
I want to throw a wild thought to you. Would you be open to creating a new piece of our thing? I don't know, once a year or once a month, where we do 5-minute cameos, inviting fans who write and have interesting things to say to come on and throw in a guest clip.
I like that idea.
I think so it would throw off the scene here if they came on the call, but what we could do is have them submit things to be read.
Okay, I can go with that.
Like if people posted like a lightning round of questions, they asked a question and they were entitled to a 3-minute answer from 1 minute from each one of us, and answer for that question. That would be a pretty fun show, actually.
But I just want to hold this up again for anybody. If you haven't gotten, not that's the Silmarillion. Everybody here has the Silmarillion. I just want to say, if you don't have this book, this just came out 3 years ago. This is the latest thing to come out of the Tolkien estate. Get it. It's not just all the Numenor stories in one place. It is that, but it's beautiful. To read it all.
What just came out, John?
In the Fall of Numenor. In chronological. Yeah, of course you have it. To read it all in chronological order with these wonderful illustrations and all the illuminations and everything. I just want to say, just highly recommend anybody who's on the fence and saying, well, I've read The Lost Road and I read the Akalabeth. I pretty much know what's going on. There's way more in there, and it's really great to read it in that chronological order that they've put it in. Anyway, guys, what we're going to do at this point, because we're ending here, is we're going to come over here to the Grey Havens to sail off to the Undying Lands. Until next time, I'm going to go over streaming schedules for you guys and let you guys know what's happening. But before I do that, just real quick, just promotions. You can visit all of us on Quora, where we do all of our writing. I am, of course, John Sierra. Same name is on here on Quora. Sid Kemp on Quora. Lore Master. That's Matt Richardson on Quora. Also, loremaster.com. You can go there and see a lot of great stuff there. If you're watching this and you haven't subscribed to the channel on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel. If you're watching this on Twitch and you're not following me, go ahead and do that. And if you want to support me in a greater way, consider subscription on Twitch or membership on YouTube. They're very cheap and they really help me out, and you get some cool little icons on your profile pictures. So just consider that. And let me just go over the streaming schedule. So if you're watching on Twitch, I do gaming streams daily. I'll just give you guys the next week or so very quickly. Tomorrow afternoon, I will be live playing Final Fantasy IV The After Years. Saturday night, we'll be playing Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Sunday night, Mega Man X2 and X3. Monday afternoon, Street Fighter V. Tuesday night, Ender Lily's Quietest of the Nights. Also, some great lore in that book, by the way. That game, by the way. And then Thursday, a week from today, is going to be another Tolkien stream. That's the 14th. I'll be live here reading The Two Towers to you guys and going over all the lore and everything. That being said, if you're watching on YouTube, the stream schedule is as follows. On the 14th, as I mentioned, we will be reading The Two Towers. On the 21st, we will be returning to the Fellowship of the Ring video game. We left off right where I got to the Barrow Downs, and the Barrow Whites got me, and I had to replay a little bit, but I'm back there, and we'll continue the story from there. By the way, because I know Matt would be wondering, yes, Goldberry is depicted in the game. Her voice is horrible, though. I don't know what they were thinking with that voice.
Darn it.
Yeah, she sounds like this. It's so weird because she looks young, but she sounds like a crone sort of thing. And then the next Tolkien stream will actually be September the 4th, where we'll be meeting back here with the Council of Tolkien. So for those of you watching on Twitch, we're going to go ahead and do a raid, which means you guys are going to be brought over to another stream. For those of you watching on YouTube, the stream will end at this point. It will be made members only for a little while. So if you want to watch it back, you'll have to be a member or just wait a while. Who are we going to raid? Let's see real quick here. I think I'm going to raid... there's a lot of people online right now. I think I'm going to raid Shiny Mudkip. She's playing Persona 5 Royal. That's always a good time. Let's raid her. So I will see you guys on the Discord. I will see you guys tomorrow or next week or whatever it is that you'll be joining me on. And